Hi all. So in this video we are going to see about use case diagram, and this will be mainly about the theoretical part of use case diagram, and we will see about how to draw the use case diagram for a particular scenario using enterprise architect in the next session. So the major learning outcomes is nothing but we will learn about what is a use case diagram, and what is an actor, use cases, relationships, and what are the steps that we should keep in mind while we are preparing a use case model, and how can we construct it, that we will see in detail by using the tool in the next class, and what is a use case narrative, and also about the importance of the events. So the first thing is that when we look for a use case modeling, so modeling is always for to make our life easy. Okay, say we have used flowchart diagrams, we have used graphs in our younger classes, because all those basically represent the facts and the data in a better way, which we will be able to understand, right? So that's why. So when we develop a particular system or a product as well, there are certain challenges in this whole system development process, right? And the first major challenge is nothing but the problem itself. Is it worth it to keep moving on, or we should drop this problem at the initial stage itself? So for that, we should have a proper problem statement, and then we need to identify the requirements gathering, right? I mean, like, say if I need to proceed with this particular problem or product, what all are the requirements that I should gather, right? And we should specify the system requirements, and we have already learned about what is a functional requirement, what is a non-functional requirement of regarding a problem, and we have also seen about the various ways we could gather the system requirements, like interview, this brainstorming sessions, the joint application development. There are different ways that the surveys, the different ways we could gather information from people in order for our proceeding with the project, right? So we need to verify, we need to validate the system requirements. So once that is done, the next step in this whole process is nothing but modeling, right? So we have to model the data and the process, and that will be modeled in such a way that as per the understanding of the developers, right? Not by the users. I mean, like, say as a client, if I have told you certain requirements, so according to the way that you perceive as a developer, you will build the model, right? So is that the one actually I said? We will get to know only after the completion of the model, or maybe by some intermediate reviews, right? So that is what where the modeling comes in the picture, right? So only if you have a clear understanding about the requirements, you will be able to model the data or the process in the best way possible, right? So now, say this is one understanding. That means, like, is it easy for you to understand this particular picture? Okay, or is this understandable for you? Yes, it might be understandable, but it will take some time, right? But is this understandable for you, right? So you have a customer, you have look up item availability, create new order, update order. So this is really simple for you to understand what it is, right? So this is the beauty of the UML diagram. This is exactly what we are going to do. This is a use case diagram. So in this session, we are basically going to understand how better or how efficiently you can make a use case diagram, and who all are the parts of the use case diagram, what are the kind of the relationships that you can depict in a use case diagram. Now let's move on to use case modeling, right? So when you move on to the use case modeling, there are certain things which you have to keep in mind. So you need to model a business process in terms of certain things. I mean, like, what are the business events that can occur in the whole process, and what would be the trigger? I mean, like, the starting point or the trigger for that particular business event, and what all will be the system responses to that business event. So you will have a trigger which will help you to start this process, and what all are the business events itself, and say if one of the business event happened, what would be the response that is expected out of that business event, right? So these are the major things which we will see. And so use case modeling is one of the basic modeling in object oriented modeling, because we consider everything in the modeling as objects. So if you have learned about object oriented programming, basically you'll be able to understand this whole concepts very in an easier manner. Okay, so now, and this is well accepted by non-object methodologies as well as good as communication. I mean, like this turns out, like I say, when you look at this diagram, it turns out to be like a very good communication tool. So even a, I mean, like 4 or 5 year old kid, if she can read and write, by looking at this picture, she will be able to understand what is happening here, right? So it's a good communication tool with the end users. Now the major benefits of use case modeling, the first thing is that it can capture the functional requirements, right? So we have a set of functional requirements for any business event, right? Any business process. So it can capture it very nicely. It can depict it in a very nice way, and you can decompose the system scope into manageable pieces. That means that you might have a bigger task that is very difficult to manage. You can actually subdivide it into manageable pieces and depict in your use case model, right? Good communication tool, as we said. And then the project scope and task and schedule, everything could be identified by this use case model, and there will be a good starting point for the test cases and the test plan and everything. And it's a baseline for the user help system. There will be proper training manuals and system development documentation. So by looking at this, you can actually start building all these things, right? And it provides us a tool for requirements traceability, and so how you have to actually proceed. So what are the things which has to be prioritized, how it has to be done, what is a budget, what is a time period that has to be allocated for each one. So everything, you can have a complete traceability matrix about you, whether how much you have completed, how many requirements you have completed, whether it is in the order, whether it is dependent to each other, which one is completed, which one is not. So all this you will be able to identify. And a good starting point to identify the data objects, which will help you for building your proper database, and provides functional specifications for designing user and system interfaces. So because in use case diagram, you can even depict about, even you can think about your system interfaces, that how your user will interact with your system, right? So even that point, it is very clear here. And you can also, it is also a means of defining the database system requirements, access requirements. So it means, like, the complete system or the complete product that you're going to build could be represented by using a use case model. And when you look about the use case diagram, it's just a graphical representation, and it is between the system and the actors, right? So it depicts the functionality of the system and the boundaries of the system, right? An actor in a use case diagram is just a person, an object, or a time, or an organization, or any other system with interact with system to exchange information. So there is a transaction or exchange of information which will happen, and that will basically happen between actors, right? And in between these transactions, you will have use cases. So you have two different actors, and the actors will have use cases in between. That means the behavior of the system or the functions of the system, right, will be represented by using the use case. So function provided by the system as a set of events, and which yields a visible result to the actor, initiated by the actor, that access the functionality of the system, and another use case. So when you look at this particular picture, so this is just an example. So it just very clearly you will be able to understand that you can have different type of events that can happen. So you can have external events, say a customer pays bill, right? So you could say that the customer pays bill. Instead of saying customer pays bill, you could say that record a payment. So record a payment could be a use case. Okay, record a payment could be a use case here. So instead of saying that customer pays the bill, you can say record a payment. Then customer makes a charge. So you could say that processing charge is your use case. Customer changes address. So you could say that maintain customer data. So that could be one of your the functions of your system, right, or use case of your system. So now time to send late notices. So sent late notices. So even though you have that description in your mind, you should put it in a better way. I mean, like time to produce end of week summary report. So produce summary reports would be your, so you should put it in a in a proper formal terminology. Now there could be also temporal events. So this, which is something which is related to the time, are called as a temporal event. So you can have external events and you can have timely events which has to happen at regular period of time. And now the major symbols which is used. So this is the same use case diagram. So there is a name convention which is used, like verb plus noun. Okay, and this is an actor and this is another actor, and you can have system boundaries. This green color thing is a system boundary. And when you look at the associations, you can have different type of relationships, and these oval shaped things which you could see inside are other use cases. So look up item availability, create a new order, update order. These are all the use cases. These are the actors. So there are some transactions or some exchange of information which is happening between the customer and the order clerk. So customer asks for lookup availability, and it is actually done by the order clerk, and creates a new order, update the order, right? So there is a system availability as well. So it's mainly by, you know, the naming convention, which is like verb plus noun, lookup item availability, or create new order, update order, right? So use case association relationship. So there are many types of relationships basically, but mainly the relationship which we commonly use is the association relationship, right? So association relationship is like how each actors, say you have two different actors, say just imagine that you have a bank customer is an actor and bank database is another actor. So what is a kind of the interaction between them? So there is a relationship between these two actors, and there exists an interaction between both of them with the help of a use case. So that is called as an association. Okay, so it is actually given as a solid line, and when you look at here, you can very clearly understand that the customer is actually logging into the ATM, and it is extended. It is extended. So there is no arrowhead here, but it is extended to the database. Okay, so the arrowhead touching the use case indicates that this use case is basically initiated by the bank customer. So if you don't have this arrow, you don't know where it is actually starting, right? So now it is very clear and understandable for you that this process is basically initiated by the bank customer. So bank customer has to log into the ATM, right? Now the line without arrows just says that it is actually going to the database. Say I need to take, I have balance of 1000 rupees and I need to take 500 rupees from the ATM. So the bank customer logins to the database. That information goes to the bank database, and I am verified and authenticated. If I am okay, the available balance is basically shown by the bank database as 1000 rupees. Now I am entering 500, and that 500 has to be debited, and the remaining amount has to be updated back to the database, and I need to get the money, right? So this basically shows a complete association between bank customer and database, and it could be bidirectional or it could be unidirectional, right? Sometimes you also, so maybe you are actually asking something to a, say, customer care center. So you are asking a question, the customer care center guy has to reply you back. So it could be bidirectional as well, right? Now as it is a machine, we are just saying it as a unidirectional one. Now what are the major objectives and the steps of requirements in the use case modeling? So the first objective of your use case modeling itself is collect and analyze requirements free of implementation data. So still we have not touched any implementation, right? So we need to get as much as information as possible by analyzing the system. So we are extensively modeling the system to analyze the system, right? So we use this use case as a communication tool. So for that, the basic step is you need to come out with the actors, yes, and you will have an actor glossary. We will see what is an actor glossary, and you will have the various business cases, like use cases which is there. So you will have a use case glossary. So these are very important because this you will have to do it in your project as well, and construct the use case model diagram. So this is the diagram. Say if this is the diagram, this is the diagram which you are going to create, and produce use case narratives. That is nothing but high level and fully documented solution which anybody who is reading that narrative will be able to identify and understand what is the kind of the process, who initiates the process, what is the flow of the actions. Everything could be identified by that use case narrative. Okay, so now moving over to the business actors. So how can we identify the business actors from a use case? Like scenario which is given to you. So you need to ask certain questions like who provides input to the system, who will receive the output of the system, is there a need for any interface in the sense like a website or a use case interfaces which will come in between, and are there use cases triggered by time? Okay, so are there any use cases triggered by the time, who will maintain the information in the system, all this informations you can ask to the system by considering the application in your mind. You can ask these questions and you can identify the business actors associated with the application that you're working on. The second one is business requirements use cases, right? So that is nothing but the task performed by the actor. So now we are actually moving over to the functionalities, right? So you are mainly concentrating, or your perspective is on the tasks, right? So the tasks performed by the, say if I am a bank customer, I can actually log into the system, I can withdraw money, I can get the receipt, right? I have so many things, which so many functionalities which I can do upon that particular application. What information does the actor provide? Say if I'm asking, then at the receiver end, what should be the information that I should get, right? What information the actor need from the system? Are there any documents that can be used to discover new use cases? So can you look upon to the previous documents to identify it, or can you talk with some other person to identify it, or can you talk with the client to get more information? Can you talk with the project manager to get more information? Okay, can you go to a similar kind of competitor or company to identify what is happening there, right? So this all comes in the picture. Now this is what I told about. This is nothing but the use case glossary. So in the use case glossary, you will have all the information. Say if you are actually coming out with an order use case, so submit subscription order, right? So this is your first use case. Now submit subscription renewal order is your second function. The third function is submit member profile changes, submit place order. I mean, like, these are all the major functions. So in your glossary, so if a person who doesn't know about your system comes and see, he wants to know better about your use case glossary, I mean like use case diagram, then he can actually read this. Okay, the use case describes the event of potential members requesting to join the club by subscribing. So it is a description actually which is given to this particular use case or the function that is actually part of your system. Now here, participating actors and roles. So who will be part of this particular use case? So you will have a potential member and you will have a distribution center, right? So these are the two different actors who are part of this particular use case. So you will get a very clear idea, a very detailed idea about the use case itself and the actors associated with it and what is it all about. So all this complete information or detailed information can be identified with the help of this use case glossary. Now, how can you convert this use case glossary into a use case diagram? This is very, very important, because maybe as your client side, you have a developer or you have an analyst at the client side, they might be giving a use case glossary like this to you. So as a analyst or as a model developer, you will have to identify from the use case glossary and develop the model, right? So by looking up that, okay, look up supplier. So enter and update. So you are actually entering into more details. Okay, maybe at the lookup contact itself, I need to look up the contact and then enter or update the contact. Look up the product and then enter or update the product information. Then I need to update the product image. Then a small description related to all of those will be given to you. This is nothing but how you will actually change your use case glossary to a use case diagram itself, right? So when you have this description, then it is very easy, because you already know the various use cases which are available here, right? So here you have this is the client abstract one which is actually given to you, and here is the one which is actually given to you in a very detailed format. So once it is there, it's very easy for you to understand that, okay, it's lookup supplier, it's enter or update, it's lookup contact and enter or update information. So this is the use case diagram, and that's a purchasing agent and manager who is actually involved in it, right? So this information will be given to you. So you will have the use case name, its description, and even the actors or the roles who are actually participating in it. Now this is an example of an online use case system. So you have a customer and you search for the item, product. So it's like this is your system. So this, from the system itself, you're going to get everything to the customer. So this is also possible. It's not mandatory that you need both the sides. You have a customer and the other part, right? So now we will learn about what is a use case narrative. So use case narrative is again a textual description of the business event itself, right? So that specifies the steps between them. So it will have a brief description about what your problem is all about, and it will have an intermediate description, and it will have fully developed description. So by getting all this, by going through all this description, you will be really thorough about what is happening. Say create new order. So we are just taking one use case. Okay, so we are actually doing the use case narrative. So you will have to do the use case narrative for all the use cases which are there in the system, right? So we are taking one use case narrative. So for one use case narrative, you can have a brief description, right? When the customer calls the order, the clerk and the systems verify the customer information, create a new order, add items to the order. So you are actually giving all major subdivisions that has to be problems that has to be dealt here. That's it. Now you can have an intermediate description. So in the intermediate description, you have the flow of activities, right? So the main flow, customer calls RMO and gets the order, clerk, right? And then order clerk verifies. So who does that? Okay. And say if a new customer, invoke maintain customer information use case to. So this is actually kind of you can actually add this as an exceptional condition that you will identify later. And see, these are all the major things. And if an item is not in the stock, what has to be done? So some special cases might be there. If the customer payment is rejected, what you have to do? And if the new if a new customer, invoke maintain customer account information, this is something which only works, which you have to work only for a new customer. So it's a special case. So such special cases could be actually considered as exception conditions, and you can actually put it as your special cases in the intermediate description itself. So this is otherwise the normal flow of your description, right? And so that's all about it. And yeah, this is again a fully described description. So you have your use case, the scenario, what is a triggering event, so where you have to initiate, what is a brief description, who are all the actors which are part of it, what are the related use cases, because one use case might be related with another person, right? The stakeholders, preconditions that you have to assume, post conditions, and the flow of activity. So when you look at this, this is the actor and this is the system, right? So sales clerk answers telephone and connects to the customer, okay? And clerk verifies the customer information. So see here in the system what has to, this is the interface, right? So display customer. So once the verification is done, display the customer information. Now clerk initiates the what, so you are actually creating a new order, and clerk initiates the new order, and the customer requests an item to be added to the order, and the clerk verifies the item, so displays that item information, right? Clerk adds say he is actually adding something onto the order item, so the clerk has to add that item onto the order and repeat 4 5 6 until all the order has been given, and customer indicates the end order. Then what you have to do, so he will give complete order and compute totals, right, and verify the payment. So the customer submits the payment, enters the amount, so create the order transaction and finalize order. So these are the steps which has to be done, and you will have some extra cases as well, okay? Because if the customer does not exist, what happens? The clerk pauses the use case. And what will happen if the customer has a credit hold already? He's actually doing this transaction by using a credit. What has to be done, right? And say if the item is not in the stock, what will happen? So here actually he is actually verifying the item, right? So this is actually 5. So when you display it, it's not 4.1, it is actually 5.1. That's all. So the numbers has to be corresponding to the numbers which is actually there, so that it's very easy for you to understand where these exceptions will happen, right? So that's all about it. And yeah, there are certain definitions also which you have to, so which you have seen in the use cases, right? So the trigger is nothing but that initiates the order. The precondition is nothing but the state of your system before the execution happens. Then there will be some flow of events, so sequence of activities, and then exception conditions, the document that behaviors of the system if an exception or a variation from the normal flow is happening, and post condition is that the condition that must be satisfied after the completion of your use case. So by this time you would have already understood about what is all this, but this is what it is, right? And now comes the triggering events. And so the triggering event, it could be an external event. I mean, like your system itself is triggered by outside, okay? So the customer, and it could be initiated by an external order. Say customer places an order from external to the system. Say you are buying something from Amazon, right? You are actually a customer who is actually outside of your system. Then temporal, because I can either have be a guest and order items from the Amazon itself, right? Or if I am already there, you can actually verify me. Otherwise I could also buy something from your system as in guest. Then temporal is like something based on the time, right? So say I have a timely deadlines that I need to create the monthly report every time, every month by 30th of every month I need to create monthly report. So it's like a temporal one. It's based on the time. And state, it is nothing but something that inside the system triggers, like stock level falls below reorder point, or say the item is out of stock. So what you have to do, so you have already created another use cases for this one. So it could be so one use case is actually dependent on another one, right? So that is also possible, right? So these are the different ways that you can actually trigger a use case event. And that's also, now you could actually take a moment and think about, how can you, when you're placing an order in ATM, so what all could be the activities that has to be there, or functions that has to be there, and what are the actors and the use cases associated with it. You can have a look over to it and come out with some exercise, right? And we will learn about the use case enterprise architect in the next session. So that's all for the day. So hope you understood about what is a use case model. So use case is just a unified modeling language, which is basically used for if you have a very clear functional requirements, or if you're very clear about what is to be done with your system. If your requirements are clear, then your use case modeling is basically easy. Okay, and it's a good communication tool, and you are actually creating a use case diagram, and there will be actors, use cases, and there could be various events which are happening. That could be external, or there could be temporal, or there could be even internal events. And there are certain conventions that you have to follow, and there are certain relationship which you have to know. The main one which you have to know is association relationship, and these are the objectives and the various steps that are actually part of the use case modeling. And for each step you can have a set of questions that you can ask yourself to have a clear idea about what you're actually going to make, and by using the use case diagram. And you can have use case glossary and actor glossary, which is actually important for you. And from the use case glossary, once you have the use case glossary, it's very easy for you to develop your use case diagram. And you should also have a very clear use case narrative, which can have brief description, intermediate description, or full description, which will help you to clearly understand which is happening in your whole system. So that's all about it. So have a look over to it, and go through the topic, and if you have any issues or anything like that, you can always get back to me. Thank you so much. All the best.